Oh, I did it again. I have the sound on and I don't know why. Oh, for heaven's sake. Where is it? Oh, where? Literally. Oh, there it is. Oh my goodness. I never learn. Good evening, everyone. This is not going to be a very long intro. This is going to be an intro long enough to say, let me collect myself for a second. If you claim to be a patriotic American and will disavow our electoral process without proof, you should reconsider where your priorities are. And if you don't get the vaccine for COVID, you are an idiot. So, that's all I want to say. And I'm going to start reading now. Because if I don't start reading, I'll keep talking extemporaneously more, and I don't want to do that. So, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put on my stupid glasses that don't work, because I don't need them. And I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Because I am not happy today. But let's get happy together, shall we? I soon learned to know this flower better. On the little prince's planet, the flowers had always been very simple. They had only one ring of petals. They took up no room at all. They were a trouble to nobody. One morning they would appear in the grass, and by night they would have faded peacefully away. But one day, from a seed blown from who knows where, a new flower had come up. And the little prince had watched very closely over this small sprout, which was not like any other small sprouts on his planet. It might, you see, have been a new kind of baobab. But the shrub soon stopped growing and began to get ready to produce a flower. The little prince, who was present at the first appearance of a huge bud, felt at once that some sort of miraculous apparition must emerge from it. But the flower was not satisfied to complete the preparations for her beauty in the shelter of her green chamber. She chose her colors with the greatest care. She dressed herself slowly. She adjusted her petals one by one. She did not wish to go out into the world all rumpled like the field poppies. It was only in the full radiance of her beauty that she wished to appear. Oh yes, she was a coquettish creature, and her mysterious adornment lasted for days and days. Then, one morning, exactly at sunrise, she suddenly showed herself. And after working with all this painstaking precision, she yawned and said, "Oh dear, I did it. There we go. Sorry." She yawned and said, "Ah, I am scarcely awake. I beg that you will excuse me. My petals are all disarranged." But the little prince could not restrain his admiration. "Oh, how beautiful you are!" "Am I not?" the flower responded, sweetly. "And I was born at the same moment as the sun." The little prince could guess easily enough that she was not any too modest. But how moving and exciting she was. "I think it's time for breakfast," she added an instant later, "if you would have kindness to think of my needs." "What? Oh, for heaven's sake." "Sorry, wrong picture. That was silly. I think it's time for breakfast, she added an instant later, and if you would have the kindness to think of my needs. And the little prince, completely abashed, went to look for a sprinkling can of fresh water. So he tended the flower. So, too, she began very quickly to torment him with her vanity, which was, if truth be known, a little difficult to deal with. One day, for instance, when she was speaking of her 4 thorns, she said to the little prince, "Let the tigers come with their claws." "There are no tigers on my planet," the little prince objected, "and anyway, tigers do not eat weeds." "I am not a weed," the flower replied sweetly. "Please excuse me. I am not at all afraid of tigers," she went on, "but I have a horror of drafts. I suppose you wouldn't have a screen for me?" "A horror of drafts? That is bad luck for a plant," remarked the little prince, and added to himself, "This flower is a very complex creature." "At night I want you to put me under a glass globe. It is very cold where you live. In the place where I come from." But she interrupted herself at that point. She had come in the form of a seed. She could not have known anything of any other worlds. Embarrassed over having let herself be caught on the verge of such a naive untruth, she coughed 2 or 3 times in order to put the little prince in the wrong. "The screen? I was just going to look for it when you spoke to me." Then she forced herself to cough a little more so that he should suffer from remorse all the same. So the little prince, in spite of all the good will that was inseparable from his love, had soon come to doubt her. He had taken seriously words which were without importance and made him very unhappy. "I ought not to have listened to her," he confided to me one day. "One never ought to listen to the flowers. One should simply look at them and breathe their fragrance. Mine perfumed all my planet." Oh, that's not even the right picture. For heaven's sake. Oh, I took the wrong picture. I skipped a picture. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm all over the place today. I'm so sorry. "I ought not to have listened to her," he confided to me one day. "One never ought to have listened to the flowers. One should simply look at them and breathe their fragrance. Mine perfumed all my planet, but I did not know how to take pleasure in all her grace. This tale of claws, which disturbed me so much, should only have filled my heart with tenderness and pity." And he continued his confidences. "The fact is that I did not know how to understand anything. I ought to have judged by deeds and not by words. She cast her fragrance and her radiance over me. I ought never to have run away from her. I ought to have guessed all the affectation that lay behind her poor little stratagems. Flowers are so inconsistent. But I was too young to know how to love her. I believe that for his escape he took advantage of the migration of a flock of wild birds. On the morning of his departure, he put his planet in perfect order. He carefully cleaned out his active volcanoes. He possessed 2 active volcanoes, and they were very inconvenient for heating his breakfast in the morning. He also had 1 volcano that was extinct, but, as he said, one never knows. So he cleaned out his extinct volcano too. If they were well cleaned, volcanoes burn slowly and steadily, without any interruptions. Volcanic eruptions are like fires in a chimney. On our Earth, we are obviously much too small to clean out our volcanoes. That is why they bring no end of trouble upon us. The little prince also pulled up, with a certain sense of dejection, the last little shoots of the baobabs. He believed that he would never want to return. But on this last morning, all these familiar tasks seemed very precious to him. And when he watered the flower for the last time and prepared to place her under the shelter of her glass globe, he realized that he was very close to tears. "Goodbye," he said to his flower. But she made no answer. "Goodbye?" he said again. The flower coughed. But it was not because she had a cold. "I have been silly," she said to him at last. "I ask your forgiveness. Try to be happy." He was surprised by this absence of reproaches. He stood there, all bewildered, the glass globe still held arrested in midair. He did not understand this quiet sweetness. Of course I love you," the flower said to him. "It's my fault that you've not known it all the while. That is of no importance. But you've been just as foolish as I. Try to be happy. Let the glass globe be. I don't want it anymore. But the wind, my cold, it's not so bad as all that. The cool night air will do me good. I am a flower. But the animals, well, I must endure the presence of 2 or 3 caterpillars if I wish to become acquainted with the butterflies. It seems that they are very beautiful. And if not the butterflies and the caterpillars, who will call upon me? You will be very far away. As for the large animals, I am not at all afraid of them. I have my claws." And naively, she showed her 4 thorns. Then she added, "Don't linger like this. You have decided to go away. Now go." For she did not want to see him. For she did not want him to see her crying. She was such a proud flower. He found himself in the neighborhood of the asteroids 325, 326, 327, 328, 329, and 330. He began, therefore, by visiting them in order to add to his knowledge. The first of them was inhabited by a king. Clad in royal purple and ermine, he was seated upon a throne which was at the same time both simple and majestic. "Ah, here is a subject!" exclaimed the king when he saw the little prince coming. And the little prince asked himself, how could he recognize me when he had never seen me before? He did not know that the world is simplified for kings. To them, all men are subjects. "Approach, so that I might see you better," said the king, who felt consumingly proud of being at least a king over something. The little prince looked everywhere to find a place to sit down, but the entire planet was crammed and obstructed by the king's magnificent ermine robe. So he remained standing upright, and since he was tired, he yawned. "It is contrary to etiquette to yawn in the presence of a king," the monarch said to him. "I forbid you to do it so." "I can't help it. I can't stop myself," replied the little prince, who apparently is Nathan Lane in this story. Thoroughly embarrassed, "I have come on a long journey, and I have had no sleep." "Ah, then," the king said. "I order you to yawn. It is years since I have seen anyone yawning. Yawns, to me, are objects of curiosity. Come now, yawn again. It is an order." "That frightens me. I cannot anymore," murmured the little prince, now completely abashed. Replied the king. Then I order you sometimes to yawn, and sometimes to... He sputtered a little, and seemed vexed. For what the king fundamentally insisted upon was that his authority should be respected. He tolerated no disobedience. He was an absolute monarch. But, because he was a very good man, he made his orders reasonable. "If I ordered a general," he would say by way of example, "if I ordered a general to change himself into a seabird, and if that general did not obey me, that would not be the fault of the general. It would be my fault." "May I sit down?" came now a timid inquiry from the little prince. "I order you to do so," the king answered him, and majestically gathered in a fold of his ermine robe. But the little prince was wondering. The planet was tiny. Over what could this king really rule? "Sure," he said to him. "I beg that you will excuse my asking you a question." "I order you to ask me a question," the king hastened to assure him. "Sire, over what do you rule?" "Over everything," said the king with magnificent simplicity. Over everything?" The king made a gesture which took in his planet, the other planets, and all the stars. "Over all that?" asked the little prince. "Over all that," the king answered. For his rule was not only absolute, it was also universal. "And the stars obey you?" "Certainly they do," the king said. "They obey instantly. I do not permit insubordination." Such a power was a thing for the little prince to marvel at. If he had been master of such complete authority, he would have been able to watch the sunset not 44 times in one day, but 72, or even 100, or even 200 times, without ever having to move his chair. And because he felt a bit sad as he remembered his little planet, which he had forsaken, he plucked up his courage to ask the king a favor. "I should like to see a sunset. Do me that kindness. Order the sun to set." "If I ordered a general to fly from one flower to another like a butterfly, or to write down tragic drama, or to change himself into a seabird, and if the general did not carry out the order that he had received, which one of us would be in the wrong?" the king demanded. "The general or myself?" "You," said the little prince firmly. "Exactly. One must require from each one the duty which one can perform," the king went on. "Accepted authority rests first of all on reason. If you ordered your people to go and throw yourselves into the sea, they would rise up in revolution. I have the right to require obedience because my orders are reasonable." Then my sunset?" the little prince reminded him, for he never forgot a question once he had asked it. "You shall have your sunset. I shall command it. But according to my science of government, I shall wait until conditions are favorable. When will that be? Inquired the little prince. Replied the king, and before saying anything, he consulted a bulky almanac. That will be about this evening, about 20 minutes to 8. And you will see how well I am obeyed. The little prince yawned. He was regretting his lost sunset. And then, too, he was already beginning to be a little bored. I have nothing more to do here, he said to the king. I shall set out on my way again. Do not go, said the king, who was very proud of having a subject. Do not go. I shall make you a minister. A minister of what? A minister of justice. But there's nobody here to judge. We do not know that, the king said to him. I have not yet made a complete tour of my kingdom. I am very old. There is no room here for a carriage, and it tires me to walk. I've looked here already, said the little prince, turning to give one more glance to the other side of the planet. On that side, as on this, there was nobody at all. Then you shall judge yourself, the king answered. That is the most difficult thing of all. It is much more difficult to judge oneself than to judge others. If you succeed in judging yourself rightly, then you are indeed a man of true wisdom. Yes, said the little prince, but if I can judge myself anywhere, I don't need to live on this planet. Said the king, I have good reason to believe that somewhere on my planet there is an old rat. I hear him at night. You can judge this old rat. From time to time you will condemn him to death. Thus his life will depend on your justice, but you will pardon him on each occasion, for he must be treated thriftily. He is the only one we have. I replied the little prince, I don't like to condemn anyone to death. And now I think I will go on my way. No, said the king. But the little prince, having now completed his preparations for departure, had no wish to grieve the old monarch. If your majesty wishes to be promptly obeyed, he said, he should be able to give me a reasonable order. He should be able, for example, to order me to be gone by the end of 1 minute. It seems to me the conditions are favorable. As the king made no answer, the little prince hesitated a moment. Then, with a sigh, he took his leave. I make you my ambassador, the king called out hastily. He had a magnificent air of authority. The grown-ups are very strange, the little prince said to himself as he continued on his journey. So, we have met at least one neighbor in the little prince's area where his asteroid is. Tomorrow, we will meet a number of others. So how far are we going? Just a second. I'm just curious to see where we're headed with this. Oh, yes. All right. So tomorrow we are staying exclusively in the planets in the prince's neighborhood. I'm sorry to be so disjointed today. This day has distracted me considerably, and I beg your forgiveness. But it's good to be here. This kind of gives me stability to my day, and I'm very glad that you're here. And please be happy, please be healthy, and drop me a line, won't you? I'll see you tomorrow.